They were just children shivering in the snow with no one left to call their own, until a quiet cowboy opened his door without a word. What made a man so silent offer warmth to strangers, and what was he trying to thaw in himself? Snow falls like a death sentence across the rugged landscape of Silver Hollow, where the wind cuts through flesh like a rusty blade, and survival depends on how much wood you've chopped and how thick your cabin walls are built. Deep in this frozen wasteland sits a solitary log cabin, smoke curling from its chimney like a lonely prayer ascending to an indifferent sky. Inside, Wade Langley tends his fire with the methodical precision of a man who's learned that routine is the only thing standing between sanity and the crushing weight of silence. Wade isn't just any cowboy. He's a ghost living in his own skin. 3 years ago, he was a different man entirely. He had a wife who laughed at his terrible jokes, a 6-year-old daughter who could make him smile just by existing, and a ranch that felt like the center of the universe. Then came the fire. Then came the graves. Then came the silence that's been his only companion ever since. Now Wade talks to no one except his blue heeler, Buck, and even those conversations are mostly one-sided grunts and whistles. He's built walls around himself thicker than his cabin logs, and he likes it that way. People bring complications. People bring pain. Better to stay alone. But tonight, something changes everything. Buck won't stop barking. The dog's outside, howling and whining, like he's seen something that defies natural order. Wade tries to ignore it. Buck's probably just spotted a raccoon or maybe a lost elk. But the barking grows more frantic, more urgent, carrying a note of distress that cuts through Wade's carefully constructed indifference. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Wade mutters, pulling on his heavy coat and boots. The cold hits him like a physical blow as he opens the door, snow swirling around him and the yellow light spilling from his cabin. That's when he sees them. Two small figures huddled against the side of his woodshed, so still they might be frozen solid. Children, a boy and a girl, clinging to each other like survivors of a shipwreck. Their clothes are thin and inadequate, their lips blue with cold, their eyes wide with the kind of terror that comes from being abandoned in a place where morning might never come. Wade stands frozen himself, his breath forming clouds in the bitter air. Every instinct he's developed over 3 years of isolation screams at him to close the door, to pretend he never saw them, to let someone else deal with this problem. But something deeper than instinct, something he thought died with his daughter, won't let him turn away. The little girl's eyes meet his, and she whispers something that the wind almost steals. "Please, mister, we're so cold." Wade's hands tremble as he reaches for them, and it's not from the weather. As he lifts the girl into his arms, feeling how light she is, how fragile, he realizes his carefully constructed world is about to shatter once again. But this time, maybe it's supposed to. If you think this moment was intense, wait until you see what Wade finds when the storm passes. Inside the cabin, Wade moves with the awkward efficiency of a man who's forgotten how to care for anyone but himself. He wraps the children in every blanket he owns, their small bodies shivering so violently that the old rocking chair creaks with each tremor. The girl can't be more than 6, with tangled blonde hair and eyes the color of storm clouds. The boy is older, maybe 9, with dark hair and the suspicious gaze of someone who's learned not to trust adults. "What are your names?" Wade asks, ladling hot soup into 2 chip bowls with hands that haven't stopped shaking since he brought them inside. "I'm Tess," the girl whispers, her voice barely audible above the howling wind outside. "This is my brother Eli. He takes care of me." Eli's jaw tightens at this, as if being responsible for his sister is both a burden and a sacred duty. "We don't need taking care of," he says, though his chattering teeth undermine the defiance in his voice. "Soon as the storm passes, we'll be moving on." But Wade's not listening to their word. He's reading the story written on their bodies. No shoes on their feet, just strips of cloth wound around frostbitten toes. Bruises on Eli's arms that look like finger marks. A cut on Tessa's lip that's too straight to be accidental. These children haven't just wandered into the wilderness. They've been thrown into it. "Where are your parents?" Wade asks, though he's already dreading the answer. Tess looks at Eli, who gives her a sharp shake of his head. But exhaustion and cold have worn down the boy's defenses. Pa left us, Eli finally admits. Said he had business to take care of and we just slow him down. Told us to wait by the big rock until he came back. How long ago? 3 days, Tess whispers, and the words hit Wade like a punch to the gut. 3 days in this weather means their father never intended to come back. He left them to die. Wade turns away, ostensibly to stoke the fire, but really to hide the rage building in his chest. He's seen plenty of cruelty in his 34 years. During the war, on cattle drives, in the rough towns that dot the frontier. But there's something about abandoning children that reaches a special level of evil. As the kids fall asleep in his bed, curled together like puppies in a basket, Wade searches through their meager belongings. A torn blanket, a few pieces of hard candy, and at the bottom of a canvas bag, a crumpled letter with most of the words smeared beyond recognition. But one name stands out clearly in the faded ink. Mac Devers. Wade stares at that name for a long time, memorizing the handwriting, the way the letters slant. Tomorrow, when the storm clears, he'll ride into Wintersong Bluff and find out who Mac Devers is and why he left 2 children to freeze to death in the Colorado wilderness. But tonight, he sits by the fire and listens to Tess hum in her sleep. A lullaby so soft and sweet it makes his chest ache with memories of another little girl who used to sing the same tune. The storm breaks just after dawn, leaving Silver Hollow buried under 3 feet of fresh snow that sparkles like crushed diamonds in the morning sun. Wade loads supplies into his saddlebags while the children sleep. Their faces peaceful for the first time since he found them. He leaves Buck on guard duty with strict instructions to bark if anyone approaches the cabin. The ride to Wintersong Bluff takes 2 hours through snow that reaches his horse's belly, but Wade barely notices the cold. His mind is fixed on the conversation he's about to have with Sheriff Coleman, a man he's avoided for 3 years, but who might have answers about Mac Devers. Wintersong Bluff is exactly what its name suggests, a dying town perched on the edge of nowhere, its main street lined with abandoned storefronts and buildings that lean against each other like drunks sharing secrets. The sheriff's office squats at the far end of town, smoke rising from its chimney in a thin gray line that seems to disappear before it reaches the sky. Sheriff Coleman looks up from his desk when Wade enters, his weathered face showing surprise and something that might be guilt. "Wade Langley," he says slowly, "haven't seen you in town for, well, since the funeral. What brings you down from your mountain?" "Found 2 kids nearly frozen to death outside my cabin," Wade says without preamble. "Name of Devers, Tess and Eli. Want to know who left them there and why?" The sheriff's expression doesn't change, but something shifts behind his eyes, a careful blankness that tells Wade more than words could. Coleman knows something, and he doesn't want to share it. "Devers, you say?" The sheriff makes a show of checking through a stack of papers on his desk. "Name doesn't ring a bell. A lot of drifters pass through here, though. Hard to keep track of them all." Wade leans forward, his voice dropping to the quiet tone that used to make outlaws reconsider their life choices. "Sheriff, those children were left to die. Someone in this town knows something about their father, and I'm not leaving until I find out what." Coleman sets down his papers and meets Wade's stare. "Look, Langley, I understand you want to help, but some things are better left alone. Why don't you just turn them over to the territorial authorities? They'll find a place for them." "What kind of place?" The sheriff's silence stretches long enough to become its own answer. Wade has heard the stories about territorial orphanages, overcrowded, underfunded institutions where children disappear into a system that treats them like inconvenient livestock. "I'll ask around town," Wade says finally, "see if anyone remembers Mac Devers." But his inquiries yield nothing except evasive answers and nervous glances. The general store owner suddenly remembers urgent business in his stockroom. The blacksmith claims his English isn't good enough to understand Wade's questions. Even the preacher finds reasons to cut their conversation short. By afternoon, Wade realizes the truth. Everyone in Wintersong Bluff knows exactly who Mac Devers is, and nobody wants to talk about him. The question is why. As he rides back toward Silver Hollow, anger burns in his chest like swallowed whiskey. Whatever Mac Devers did, whatever trouble he caused, 2 innocent children are paying the price. And if the good people of Winter Song Bluff think they can wash their hands of responsibility by pretending ignorance, they're about to learn how wrong they are. Wade's anger carries him all the way back to the cabin, where he finds Tess and Eli awake and huddled by the dying fire. They look up at him with the wary hope of animals that have been kicked too many times to trust kindness, and something in Wade's chest cracks open despite his best efforts to keep it sealed. "Did you find Pa?" Tess asks, her small voice carrying a note of desperate optimism that makes Wade want to punch something. "Still looking," Wade lies, because the truth, that their father abandoned them and the whole town is complicit in pretending they don't exist, would destroy what little innocence they have left. As he rebuilds the fire and starts dinner, memories surface like fish rising to feed. 3 years ago, this cabin rang with laughter. His daughter Lucy would sit in that same spot where Tess now huddles, chattering about her day while her mother cooked and Wade pretended to read his newspaper. The silence that followed the fire wasn't just the absence of sound, it was the absence of life itself. Now listening to Eli's quiet questions about the storm and Tess's hummed lullabies, Wade realizes how much he's missed the simple chaos of children, the way they fill empty spaces without even trying, the way they ask questions that force you to think about answers you've forgotten you knew. But he also remembers the pain of losing them, the way grief can hollow you out until you're nothing but skin stretched over an empty frame. He spent 3 years building walls to keep that pain at bay, and these children threaten every barrier he's constructed. "Are we staying?" Eli asked suddenly, his voice carefully neutral. "Or do we have to go again?" It's the same question Eli asked yesterday and the day before, and Wade realizes it's probably a question the boy has asked in every temporary shelter he's found. How many times has this child been told he's welcome, only to be turned away when caring becomes inconvenient? "You can stay as long as you need," Wade says, and the words surprise him with their firmness. He hadn't planned to make that commitment, but watching the relief flood Eli's face makes him understand that some promises make themselves. That evening, as the children sleep, Wade sits by the fire and lets himself remember. Lucy at 3, singing off-key lullabies to her rag doll. Lucy at 5, helping him mend fences and asking endless questions about everything from why horses have 4 legs to whether clouds have feelings. Lucy at 6, the last morning before the fire, kissed his cheek and promised to help her mother bake cookies while he was in town. He'd failed her, failed to keep her safe, failed to protect what mattered most. But maybe, he's been given a chance to do better. Not to replace what he lost, because nothing could do that, but to honor Lucy's memory by protecting children who need protecting. Outside, the wind picks up again, rattling the cabin's windows like fingers trying to get in. Wade checks the door latch and adds another log to the fire. Tomorrow he'll chop more wood, repair the loose board on the porch, maybe start teaching Eli how to properly stack firewood. Small things, practical things, but also acts of hope. For the first time in 3 years, Wade Langley allows himself to imagine a future that includes more than mere survival. The knock on Wade's door comes just after breakfast, soft but persistent. Through the frosted window, he can see a figure bundled in heavy coats and scarves, leading a pack mule loaded with supplies. Tess and Eli immediately scramble behind the wood stove, their faces tight with the automatic fear of children who've learned that unexpected visitors rarely bring good news. "It's all right," Wade tells them, recognizing the visitor as Miss Clara Hensley, the retired school teacher who lives alone in a small cabin about 5 miles east. She's one of the few people in the area who might actually want to help rather than judge. Clara stamps snow off her boots as she enters, her sharp blue eyes immediately finding the children and softening with understanding. She's past 60, with gray hair that refuses to stay pinned, and the brisk manner of someone who's spent 40 years managing unruly students. "Heard you had some unexpected company," she says, setting down a basket that smells like fresh bread and cinnamon. "Thought you might need supplies." Wade pours her coffee while Tess and Eli emerge from their hiding spot, drawn by the aroma of Clara's baking. The old teacher has a gift with children. Within minutes, she has them talking about their favorite stories and whether they know their letters. "Eli can read real good," Tess announces proudly. "He taught me some words too." "Is that so?" Clara's voice carries the special warmth teachers reserve for bright students. What's your favorite word, Tess? The little girl thinks seriously before answering. Home, but I don't know how to write it yet. The simple honesty of that statement hits Wade like a physical blow. Clara's eyes meet him across the table, and he sees his own pain reflected there. After the children go outside to play in the snow, Clara's demeanor changes. The gentle grandmother facade drops away, revealing something harder underneath. Wade, I need to tell you something about those children's fathers, she says quietly, about why nobody in town wants to talk about him. Wade sets down his coffee cup, giving her his full attention. Mac Devers came through Wintersong Bluff about 4 months ago, Clara continues. He was drunk most of the time, but when he was sober, he was asking questions. Dangerous questions about land deals and missing money, about why certain people in town suddenly got rich right after the railroad company decided to change its route. The pieces start falling into place. Someone wanted him to stop asking questions. More than that, the town council, such as it is, met in secret session. I wasn't supposed to know about it, but my late husband was the bank president before he died, and some of his old friends still talk to me. Clara's voice drops to barely above a whisper. They voted to handle the Devers problem quietly. No official action, you understand. Just make sure he moved on and stayed moved on. Wade feels ice forming in his stomach. And the children? Collateral damage. Mayor Preston said they'd end up in territorial care eventually anyway. So what difference did it make if they became the territory's problem a little sooner? Clara's face twists with disgust. I'm ashamed to say I didn't speak up. I told myself it wasn't my business, that someone else would handle it properly. The cabin fills with the sound of Tessa's laughter as she and Eli build a snowman outside, their voices bright with the kind of joy that only children can find in the midst of disaster. Wade watches them through the window, these two small lives that an entire town decided were expendable. Why are you telling me this now? He asks. Clara looks at him with eyes that have seen too much and forgiven too little. Because I've watched you with them, the way you move around them, like you're afraid they'll break, the way your voice changes when you talk to them. Those children need someone who'll fight for them, Wade, someone who understands what it means to lose everything. That night after Clara has gone home and the children are asleep, Wade sits by the fire and makes a decision that will change all their lives. He's done running from responsibility, done hiding from the possibility of loss. Tess and Eli need protection, and he's the only one willing to provide it. But first, he needs to understand exactly what they're up against. It's Eli who finds the ledger 3 days after Clara's visit. Wade is outside splitting firewood when he hears the boy call his name with an urgency that sends him running toward the cabin, axe still in hand. Mr. Wade, Eli says breathlessly, holding up a small leather-bound book. I found this sewn into the lining of Pa's saddlebag. The thread was coming loose, and when I pulled on it, the ledger is water-stained and worn, but the writing inside is clear and methodical. Page after page of names, dates, and dollar amounts that tell a story of corruption so systematic it takes Wade's breath away. Railroad officials paid to change routes. Land commissioners bribed to alter survey maps. Bank presidents convinced to approve questionable loans that were never meant to be repaid. And at the center of it all, one name appears over and over: Silas Blackwood, mayor of Blackridge Flats, a town about 60 miles southeast that Wade knows by reputation as a place where money talks louder than law. Pa said this book was important, Eli explains, hovering anxiously as Wade studies the entries. Said it was his insurance policy, whatever that means. He made me promise to keep it safe if anything happened to him. Wade turns to a page near the back, where several entries are marked with red ink. All of them involve land deals in and around Wintersong Bluff, purchases made by shell companies that trace back to Blackwood's business empire. The final entry, dated just a week before the children were abandoned, consists of a single line: they know. Moving the children to safety. If something happens to me, take this to the territorial marshal in Denver. Tess peers over Wade's shoulder, trying to make sense of the adult words and numbers. Is that why Pa left us? Because of the book? Wade closes the ledger carefully, his mind already working through the implications. Mac Devers hadn't been just another drunk making trouble. He'd been an investigator, possibly working for someone with the authority to challenge Blackwood's operation. Someone had discovered his identity and forced him to run, but not before he'd gathered enough evidence to bring down the entire network. The question is, why hadn't he taken his children with him? Eli, Wade says slowly, did your father ever mention meeting with anyone official? Marshals, territorial attorneys, anyone like that? The boy's face scrunches with concentration. There was a man in Denver. Pa met with him twice, said he was going to help us start over somewhere safe. But then Pa came back all scared and angry, said the man couldn't be trusted. That's when he started talking about insurance policies and making sure we were protected. The picture becomes clearer. Mac had been working with federal authorities to expose Blackwood's corruption, but the investigation had been compromised. Someone, possibly the territorial marshal himself, had sold out Mac's identity, forcing him to choose between his own survival and his children's safety. He'd chosen to lead the danger away from them, gambling that they'd be safer without him than with him. It was a desperate parent's impossible choice, and it had nearly gotten them killed anyway. Wade walks to his gun cabinet and takes out his old cavalry rifle, checking the action with practiced efficiency. He hasn't worn his sidearm in 3 years, but the weight of it feels familiar as he straps on the holster. "Where are you going?" Tess asks, her voice small and frightened. Wade kneels down so he's at eye level with both children. "I'm going to find out what happened to your father, and I'm going to make sure the people who hurt your family can't hurt anyone else. But first, I need to take you somewhere safe." "We're safe here," Eli protests. "With you." "Not anymore," Wade says gently. "If your father's enemies figure out where you are, this cabin won't protect you, but I know someone who will." Buck whines from his position by the door, as if sensing that another journey is about to begin. Wade scratches the dog's ears and begins planning the most dangerous ride of his life. Clara's cabin becomes a fortress of warmth and safety as Wade prepares for the most dangerous journey of his life. The ride takes most of the morning, with Wade transferring supplies and making sure the children understand they must stay hidden no matter what happens. "How long will you be gone?" Clara asks as Wade secures the last of his gear to his saddle. "Long as it takes," Wade replies, kneeling down to say goodbye to Tess and Eli. The children cling to him with a desperation that makes his chest ache, but he forces himself to stay calm and reassuring. "You stay with Miss Clara and do exactly what she tells you," he says. "I'll be back soon." "You promise?" Tess whispers, her small hand gripping his coat like an anchor. Wade looks into her storm-gray eyes and makes the only promise he can keep. "I promise I'll come back, or I'll die trying." The ride to Black Ridge Flats takes 2 days through a country that grows meaner and more desolate with each mile. Wade has been here before, during his cavalry days, and he remembers it as a place where civilization wears thin and men are judged by how quick they are with a gun, rather than how honest they are with their word. He enters the town posing as a cattle buyer, looking for winter feed, his story rehearsed and his papers forged but convincing. The saloon keeper's friendly enough once Wade buys a bottle of whiskey and starts asking casual questions about local ranchers and business opportunities. "Blackwood's your man if you're looking to make real money," the barkeep confides, polishing glasses with practiced efficiency. "Owns most of the good grazing land between here and Colorado Springs. Smart as a snake and twice as dangerous, but fair in his dealings if you don't try to cross him." Wade nurses his whiskey and listens to the local gossip, learning more about Silas Blackwood with each round he buys for the increasingly talkative clientele. The picture that emerges is of a man who arrived in Black Ridge Flats 5 years ago with enough money to buy respectability, but not enough class to earn it. He's expanded his influence through a combination of legitimate business dealings and carefully applied pressure, always staying just inside the boundaries of the law. The breakthrough comes on his second night, when a drunk land surveyor named Murphy starts bragging about a job he'd done the previous month. "Strangest damn thing," Murphy slurs, leaning heavily against the bar. "Fellow comes to me, says he needs to verify some property lines up near Wintersong Bluff. Pays me double the rate to do it quiet-like. No official paperwork. Turns out half the land Blackwood claimed ain't legally his at all." Wade buys Murphy another drink and lets him talk. The surveyor had been hired by a man matching Mac Deaver's description, someone who was gathering evidence of fraudulent land claims and forged documents. But the investigation had been discovered before it could be completed. Poor bastard, Murphy continues, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Heard Blackwood's boys caught up with him somewhere north of here. Don't know what happened exactly, but I'd bet money we ain't going to see that fellow again. Wade's blood runs cold. If Mac Devers is dead, then Tess and Eli are truly orphans, and the only evidence of Blackwood's crimes is the ledger hidden in Wade's saddlebags. More importantly, if Blackwood's men are willing to kill to protect their secret, they won't hesitate to eliminate two children who might have witnessed something incriminating. He finishes his drink and retires to his room at the boarding house, but sleep doesn't come. Instead, he lies in the darkness and plans what needs to happen next. He can't prove Mac Devers is dead, but he can't afford to assume he's alive either. The only way to protect Tess and Eli is to end Blackwood's operation permanently. Wade checks his weapons one final time and settles in to wait for dawn. Tomorrow he'll pay a visit to Silas Blackwood's ranch and have a conversation that will determine whether those two children have a future worth living. Dawn comes gray and cold, with the promise of more snow and the heavy clouds that press down on Blackridge Flats like a lid on a coffin. Wade saddles his horse in the pre-dawn darkness, his breath forming crystals in the bitter air as he loads his rifle and checks his ammunition one final time. Blackwood's ranch sits on a mesa overlooking the town, a sprawling complex of buildings that speaks of wealth accumulated quickly and displayed without subtlety. Wade approaches openly, playing his role as a potential business partner right up until the moment he dismounts in front of the main house. The conversation with Blackwood is brief and enlightening. The man is exactly what Wade expected: smooth, confident, and utterly without conscience. He admits nothing directly, but his casual references to problems that have been solved and people who learn to mind their own business tell Wade everything he needs to know. "You're not really here about cattle, are you, Mr. Langley?" Blackwood says finally, his pale eyes studying Wade with the intensity of a predator evaluating potential prey. "No," Wade replies simply. "I'm here about Mac Devers and two children who were left to die because of what their father discovered." Blackwood's smile never wavers, but something deadly moves behind his gaze. "I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about, though I do hope you've made arrangements for those children's care. Given how dangerous the frontier can be for a man traveling alone, it's a threat wrapped in polite conversation, and Wade responds the only way he can, by walking away while he still has the option. But not before making it clear that the evidence Devers gathered won't die with him. The ride back to Silver Hollow normally takes 2 days, but Wade pushes his horse harder than he should, driven by a growing sense that time is running out. The smoke he sees rising from the direction of Clara's cabin confirms his worst fears. When he arrives, he finds Clara's small homestead under attack. His heart hammers against his ribs as he sees the main cabin already in flames, black smoke billowing into the gray sky. But Buck's desperate barking from the tree line draws his attention away from the destruction. The blue healer leads him to a small cave hidden among the boulders, where he finds Tess and Eli huddled together with Clara's arms around them both. They're alive, unharmed, but their faces show the stark terror of children who've seen evil up close and personal. "I saw them coming," Clara explains, her voice shaking but determined. 4 men, moving with purpose. I got the children out through the back window, and we ran for the rocks. They burned my place when they couldn't find us." Clara's face is grim as she describes what happened. 4 men, armed and moving with purpose. They didn't even try to make it look like an accident, just doused my place with kerosene and struck a match. When they couldn't find the children, they started searching the area. We've been hiding here since yesterday. Wade pulls them all closer, feeling the terrible weight of his failure. He'd tried to draw the danger away from the children, but he'd underestimated Blackwood's reach and ruthlessness. Now Clara's home is gone, and the people he cares about are fugitives in their own territory. "There's more," Clara says quietly. "One of them came back this morning, asking questions about where you might have taken the children. He had a message for you." She hands him a piece of paper with a few lines scrawled in crude handwriting. "We know about the book. Bring it to Devil's Canyon at midnight tomorrow, or the kids disappear forever. Come alone." Wade stares at the note for a long moment, then carefully folds it and puts it in his pocket. He knows Devil's Canyon, a narrow gorge about 10 miles north that's perfect for an ambush. It's exactly the kind of place where a man could disappear without a trace. But it's also the kind of place where a careful man with military training might turn the tables on overconfident criminals. Devil's Canyon earned its name honestly, a slash in the earth so narrow that sunlight only reaches the bottom for a few hours each day, with walls steep enough to make climbing impossible and only two ways in or out. It's the perfect place for a trap, which is exactly what makes Wade choose it for his counterattack. He spends the day preparing, using every skill he learned during 4 years of cavalry service and 20 years of frontier living. The ledger goes to Clara, with instructions to take it to the territorial marshal in Denver if he doesn't return. Tess and Eli receive careful instructions about where to hide and what to do if things go wrong. "You're not coming back, are you?" Tess asks, with the terrible insight that children develop when their world keeps falling apart. Wade kneels down and takes her small hands in his weathered ones. "I'm coming back," he says firmly. "But if I don't, you stay with Miss Clara, and you remember that your father was a good man who died trying to protect people. And you remember that sometimes the only way to stop bad people is to stand up to them, no matter how scared you are." The ride to Devil's Canyon takes place under a moon that's bright enough to cast shadows, but not bright enough to eliminate the advantages of darkness. Wade positions himself among the rocks at the canyon's western entrance, where he can see anyone approaching but remains hidden himself. They arrive exactly at midnight, 4 men on horseback, moving with the casual arrogance of people who've never had their ambushes turned against them. Wade recognizes the leader as Tom Brennan, one of Blackwood's top enforcers, a man with a reputation for violence and a complete absence of conscience. "Langley," Brennan calls, his voice echoing off the canyon walls. "We know you're here. Just toss out the book and walk away. Nobody has to get hurt." Wade's response comes from the darkness. Not words, but the sharp crack of his rifle firing. The first man topples from his saddle before the echo of the shot fades, and suddenly the patient hunters become panicked prey. What follows is a deadly game of cat and mouse among the rocks and shadows of Devil's Canyon. Wade uses every trick he learned fighting Apache raiders and Confederate irregulars, moving silently through terrain he studied for hours while his enemies blunder around in unfamiliar darkness. Brennan proves to be a more dangerous opponent than his men, matching Wade's military experience with a cunning born of years spent surviving on the wrong side of the law. Their final confrontation takes place on a narrow ledge halfway up the canyon wall, where a single mistake means a 100-foot fall onto jagged rocks. "This ain't over," Brennan gasps as Wade's bullet finds its mark. "Blackwood's got resources you can't imagine. He'll keep coming until he gets what he wants." "Then he'll keep dying," Wade replies simply, and Brennan's laugh turns into a death rattle that fades into the canyon's eternal silence. The ride back to Clara's cabin takes place in the gray light of dawn, with Wade carrying wounds that aren't serious but serve as permanent reminders of how close he came to leaving Tess and Eli orphaned again. When he finally arrives, exhausted and bloodied but alive, both children launch themselves into his arms with a force that nearly knocks him over. "Don't ever leave us again," Tess demands, her small fists pounding against his chest. "Don't ever, ever leave us." Wade holds them close and makes the only promise that matters. Never again. We're family now, and families stick together. Spring comes to Silver Hollow like a miracle delayed, with wildflowers pushing through snow that's held the valley in its grip for 6 long months. The new cabin rises where Wade's old homestead once stood, but it's different. Bigger, brighter, built for a family rather than a hermit. Wade sits on the front porch in the early morning light, watching Tess practice her letters on a slate board, while Eli repairs a broken bridle with the focused concentration of someone who's learned that useful skills are the difference between survival and prosperity. Buck lies at Wade's feet, gray around the muzzle now, but still alert to every sound that might threaten his expanded pack. The silence that once defined Wade's existence has been replaced by something infinitely more precious: the comfortable noise of a family going about their daily business. Tess hums while she works, the same lullabies that once broke Wade's heart but now fill it with warmth. Eli asks endless questions about everything from why horses need shoes to whether it's possible to count all the stars in the sky. Mr. Wade, Tess says, looking up from her slate with the serious expression she wears when wrestling with important thoughts. Miss Clara says our real pa might be in heaven now. Do you think he knows we're safe? Wade sets down the piece of leather he's been working and considers her question with the gravity it deserves. These conversations still come hard to him, but he's learned that children need honest answers more than comfortable lies. I think he knows, Wade says finally, and I think he's proud of how brave you both were, how you took care of each other when everything was scary and uncertain. That's what parents want most, to know their children will be strong enough to survive whatever comes. Eli looks up from his work, his young face showing the weight of experiences no child should carry. Are you our pa now, really and truly? It's the question Wade has been expecting for weeks, the one that forces him to confront what this makeshift family has become. The territorial authorities had been surprisingly cooperative once Clara delivered Mac Deaver's ledger to Denver, and the full scope of Blackwood's corruption came to light. The paperwork making Wade the children's legal guardian sits framed on the cabin's mantel, but the real bond between them goes deeper than any document could capture. If you want me to be, Wade says simply, being a father isn't just about blood, it's about choosing to love someone every day, no matter how hard things get, about being there when they need you and teaching them how to be strong when you're not around. Tess abandons her slate and climbs into Wade's lap, her small arms wrapping around his neck with the fierce possessiveness of a child who's learned not to take safety for granted. We choose you, she announces. We choose you to be our pa forever and always. The morning mail brings a letter from Clara, who's temporarily staying with relatives in Denver while testifying in the federal corruption trials that Mac Deaver's evidence made possible. Her spidery handwriting brings news from the outside world. Silas Blackwood arrested and awaiting trial, his criminal network dismantled, several territorial officials facing charges for their complicity in the land fraud scheme. But the most important news comes in the letter's final paragraph. The territorial governor has issued a formal pardon for Mac Deavers, posthumously clearing his name and acknowledging his service as an undercover investigator. There's also a reward for the evidence he gathered, $2,000 in gold to be held in trust for his children's education and future. Tell Tess and Eli their father was a hero and his sacrifice meant something. Wade reads this news aloud, watching as understanding dawns in Eli's eyes, and pride replaces the shame that's haunted him since his father's disappearance. Tess doesn't fully comprehend the legal implications, but she understands that her pa was good, that he died protecting people, and that his love for his children was real even when he couldn't show it. That evening, as the family sits around their dinner table, a real table now, built for 3 instead of 1, Wade allows himself to marvel at how completely his life has changed. The man who once spoke only to his dog now finds himself mediating disputes about whose turn it is to feed the chickens and explaining why it's important to brush your teeth even when you don't feel like it. The ghosts that once haunted this valley haven't disappeared entirely. Wade still thinks about Lucy, still carries the weight of his failure to protect her, but the grief no longer defines him. Instead, it's become part of a larger story about loss and redemption, about how love can survive even the worst tragedies if you're brave enough to risk opening your heart again. As he tucks Tess and Eli into their beds, real beds with warm quilts and soft pillows, Wade listens to their prayers and realizes that he's learned to pray again too. Not the desperate bargaining of a man trying to change the past, but the grateful acknowledgement of someone who's been given more than he deserved. Outside, the wind still howls through Silver Hollow's peaks and valleys, but it no longer sounds lonely. It sounds like home. If you thought these were crazy, you won't want to miss what happens in this next video.